Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are taking on a document that is, well, it's less a legal text and more like a Rosetta Stone for a bureaucratic fever dream.
That's a good way to put it.
We're peeling back the layers of the Grand Constitution of Mookopolis. And this is a document so dense, so aggressively complex, and it relies on this specialized and frankly often entirely invented jargon that it just feels deliberately designed to repel you.
It's truly a piece of monumental legal drafting. But its genius isn't in clarity, it's in its intentional obscurity. The whole thing feels like an exercise in extreme sesquipedanticism.
The use of incredibly long words.
Exactly. It suggests a society where just being complicated, high-flown complexity is the measure of worth. So our mission today is pretty crucial. We need to translate this administrative madness.
Yeah.
We need to get past the overwhelming vocabulary and reveal the governing structure, the definition of citizenship, and the genuinely surprising legal philosophy of the Mucktocracy of Mookopolis.
Exactly. Let's start with the preamble, because even the introduction sets this incredible, high-minded, and, well, simultaneously exclusionary tone.
It really does.
It lays out the constitutional objectives: ensuring muck-facentia, establishing muckratudinal justice, guaranteeing a paraphoria for the deserving, and securing the pulchritudinous blessings of muck.
It sounds beautiful. It sounds like an ancient epic poem.
But it's utterly inscrutable. What is muck-facentia?
Well, if you strip away all that grandiloquence, the objective is really controlled, magnificent progress, and a kind of justice that's based on merit, not on equality.
I see.
What's immediately clear is that this is not a constitution designed for universal rights. It's designed for extreme selectivity. It's about filtering the populace from the word go.
Right. The preamble immediately defines what is not Mookopian. It explicitly excludes all documented ne'er-do-wells, dotty poles, and, most interestingly, those afflicted by infinitesimania.
And that tells you everything, doesn't it? Mookopolis does not tolerate idleness, it doesn't tolerate stupidity, and it certainly does not tolerate an obsession with the infinitely small or the irrelevant.
Right.
The state actively fears people who get bogged down in minutia or, philosophical distractions. They want action. They want grandeur.
So if your hobby is, I don't know, cataloging the number of dust motes in the air, you are constitutionally preempted from even engaging with this system.
Exactly. They're setting a precedent that intellectual effort has to be directed toward large, productive goals. Not trivial or infinite theoretical problems that yield no progress toward what they call muctitude.
And what about their fiscal policy? They mention avoiding fopdudalification and hyperzeusis in public finance.
Yes, and there's just a fantastic detail. Fopdudalification, so excessive, showy spending on trifles, is constitutionally banned.
Okay.
And so is hyperzeusis, the overuse of rhetorical figures, but specifically in fiscal documents. This means the budget has to be elaborate, but not overly rhetorical, which is, it's a subtle, magnificent contradiction.
It is. It creates a mandate for, what, controlled grandeur.
Controlled grandeur. Perfect. It has to be complicated, but functionally so. It tells us that Mookopolis is a society attempting to sort of mechanize high philosophy and administrative perfection.
Okay, so let's unpack this journey into citizenship, which is, frankly, it's a gauntlet. We move now into Part 1, Article 1, the gauntlet of citizenship and the ingress of the citizenry.
And the requirements here, they're not just about checking a box for your age or where you live. They are intrusive psychological and moral fitness tests.
Right. Section 1.01, qualification and purity of essence. This is where Mookopolis establishes that moral and spiritual fitness is a measurable constitutional requirement.
It is. You have to submit to a rigorous analysis of your ipsedity, your essential, authentic self, and something called a thermiano-claval scan for traces of syllopsychophantism.
And this happens when you reach allocompessence.
Which is their term for the age of majority, yes.
A thermiano-claval scan. That sounds intense.
It implies an intense, fiery, and deeply penetrative analysis. It's not a background check, it's a soul scan.
And what are they looking for? Syllopsychophantism.
They're looking for the core tendency towards seeking favors by sucking up to power, especially when you become an adult. They want citizens who are fundamentally self-driven and morally independent.
And this scan is conducted by the infinitestrum, and it's designed to detect kitschpathology or purolepticism.
Banning bad taste, kitschpathology, and childish behavior purolepticism at a constitutional level is just. It's a unique move.
It really is.
It means Mookopolis legally equates immaturity and poor aesthetic judgment with an existential threat. The state believes if your core essence, your itsity, is infected by these flaws, you cannot contribute to the pulchritudinous blessings of muck.
So this is where the state defines itself by who it rejects. Those who are denied citizenship are immediately relegated to the miserable status of a scroll.
Yes, a scroll.
So who is this undesirable scroll?
Well, the list is basically a dictionary of philosophical and rhetorical flaws. A scroll is anyone exhibiting coxcombablement.
Vain, showy babbling.
Right, or ultra-crepidarianism.
Offering advice outside your expertise. We see a lot of that.
A lot of that. Or sentimentalitualism, so. Performing intellect just for the sake of being monitored or surveilled. And maybe most importantly, using argumentum ad crumenam.
The appeal to wealth.
In any recorded neomutterance. Any new speech.
The bar is impossibly high. You can only speak when you're an expert. You have to speak without vanity. And your financial status can't be the basis of your public argument. It forces a kind of radical intellectual humility.
And this determination isn't based on objective metrics. It's highly subjective. The council determines your snout-farity.
Your what?
Your snout-farity. How aesthetically and morally pleasing you are. And it's based on something called gallimorphology.
Gallimorphology. The morphology, the structure of your beauty or bureaucratic appearance.
Exactly. Your essential fitness, your moral appearance, is judged through an assessment of bureaucratic beauty and structure. It suggests that a clean, well-structured, and philosophically appealing administrative presence is a constitutional requirement for just existing in Mookopolis.
And if you fail this initial filtering, you are locked out of the next crucial step toward full participation.
The annual Quackerwamble mandate. Section 1.02.
The Quackerwamble.
This is the annual bureaucratic right required to participate in elections or submit referendums. This is the ultimate, continuous tool of psychological and political control.
This is clearly the centerpiece of the whole filtering process. We have to slow down here and just imagine this ordeal, the Quackerwamble.
It's mandatory. It's annual.
And it's defined as navigating 3 successive Widdershins-so counterclockwise phases of administrative gallimorphology. That counterclockwise motion alone suggests the process is unnatural, contrary to flow, and intended to be difficult.
Oh, absolutely. It's a test of persistent devotion against the state's deliberate attempt to induce fatigue. Let's break down the 3 phases, which have to be completed in order and in reverse, which challenges a linear mindset.
Okay, phase 1. The flux taperon's submittal. What on earth are we submitting here?
Well, given the name flux taperon, suggesting flow, iron, and a measure of infinite things, this must involve submitting a complete dynamic record of your activities and thoughts related to societal flow and your future potential.
So it's not just reporting your income.
Not at all. It's reporting your future intent and how your current actions are contributing to apurophoria. It's probably a document that's thousands of pages long, detailing every decision you made that year and justifying its grand purpose.
So the state isn't just checking compliance, it's demanding proof of your existential purpose in the service of Mookopolis.
Precisely.
Okay, so assuming you survive the paperwork, you move Widdershins to phase 2, the etiolapsometry calibration.
Etiolapsometry. This is a fascinating one. Etiolation is the process of weakening by lack of light, and lapsometry implies measuring lapses.
Okay, so
This phase likely involves a physical test, maybe sensory deprivation, designed to measure your tendency toward moral or intellectual weakness when you're exposed to a lack of stimulus or confusion.
it sounds like a bureaucratic stress test designed to induce a philosophical lapse. They're calibrating how close you came to failing in your mucktitude over the past year.
That's it, exactly. The state is testing not just what you achieved, but the robustness of your moral character under strain. If you're easily weakened or you're prone to despair, the calibration flags you.
And finally, the ultimate psychological test, phase 3, the syllop-sycophant interview, which takes us right back to the root sin of syllop-sycophantism.
This interview is the final high-stakes verification. It's conducted by an official, or maybe a cryobot, trained to detect any residual flattery or the desire to appease.
How would they do that?
The interviewee is probably subjected to deliberately contradictory questions or forced ethical dilemmas. They're trying to catch that last trace of subservient behavior that suggests you prioritize your political survival over true mucktitudinal justice.
And these tests aren't just burdensome. Failure has catastrophic constitutional consequences.
It does. Failure due to insouciance intentet, so a lack of concerned effort, or to junctuality, which is general dullness or emptiness.
It's not a simple administrative penalty?
No, it's deemed an act of treason. Mucklution.
Mucktocracy. So that elevates bureaucratic apathy or exhaustion to a counter-state offense.
The system demands not just participation, but enthusiastic, high-energy participation. If you're dull or empty, the state sees you as actively rebelling against the very purpose of Mookopolis.
That is just a fundamental definition of a state built on mandatory enthusiasm.
It is.
And on top of that, the triumvirate reserves the right to impose a gregaria, a sort of arbitrary, witty, poetic test, or to test your acutolexic knowledge.
Your sharp vocabulary, yes, at any point.
So why do that?
This arbitrary testing reinforces the Percepticon's control over the mind. The gregaria is a spontaneous philosophical or linguistic challenge. It's designed to check your resistance to blandishment mania, the tendency to flatter others, and sycophancy mania.
The tendency to be flattered.
Exactly. They want citizens who are neither suck-ups nor vain recipients of flattery. They are testing your intellectual quickness and your self-assurance.
So if you can't think on your feet or you're easily manipulated by a compliment, you fail the Mookopian worthiness test. It's fascinating how deeply the Constitution regulates an individual's internal moral compass.
It's a continuous annual psychological deep clean. If you step back for a moment, the big takeaway from Article 1 is that Mookopolis prioritizes institutional filtering over rehabilitation or universal suffrage.
Right.
If you're deemed flawed or dull or too flattering, you're just structurally excluded.
So let's look at the consequences of failing this filter. Moving to Section 1.03, disqualification and the ignomigmaticon. The punishments for dissent or anti-state behavior are just as aggressively specific.
Oh, yes. Engaging in scallywaglization.
So, mischief.
Picarinoclation, which is minor thievery or piracy, or catafustianism, cowardly boasting, results in censure and the loss of all periodactylic rights.
The periodactylic rights, what would those be? They sound like your rights pertaining to endless possibilities or the infinite touch.
That's a good guess. They're the rights of infinite scope, the capacity to engage in long-term, high-level planning and to access the state's technological and philosophical resources.
So losing them means?
It means you're restricted to a mundane, finite, and short-term existence. You become a dull, limited observer.
But the most severe consequence is reserved for infinitestulous treason, and this is defined as humble glorification against any state apparatus, including the cryobot units.
That is critical, and it's deeply insightful into the nature of Mookopian governance. Humble glorification is lying about or boasting against a piece of state machinery. Yes. If you claim your personal efficiency robot is faster than the state-mandated cryobot, or if you boast about subverting some low-level administrative unit, that is high treason.
So the legal sanctity of the machine is equal to the human triumvirate. That's a huge insight. The state apparatus, even the lowest robot, is sacred.
And the punishment reflects the Mookopian fear of disorder, banishment to a zone of high cacophony. Mookopolis, which prizes order, pulchronautical advancement, and structured clarity, views sensory overload as the ultimate penalty.
You're banished to where there is only noise and confusion, the complete antithesis of their state goals.
Exactly.
And all of your offenses, your moral lapses, your punishments, and records of pusillanimous behavior, cowardly thought, and petty foggerheadism, tricky complex lawyering, are all maintained in this secret archive.
The publicly inaccessible ignomigmaticon.
The ignomigmaticon.
It's the digital record of your shame, forever maintained by the panopticon. So even if you're allowed to remain a citizen, the state has an automated hidden record of every single instance where you were judged cowardly or tricky or morally weak. The state never forgets.
It sounds like a self-fulfilling prophecy of moral judgment, just always hanging over the Mookopian populace.
It is.
Okay, let's transition from the rigorously filtered citizenry to the mechanism that does the filtering, the governing body itself. We're moving to part 2. The automatron, which covers the structure of this unique mechanized government in Article 2, Section 2.01.
The governing body is the triumvirate of tricyclicomania. The name itself suggests this constant dynamic state of balancing power through relentless cyclical activity.
Right.
The key innovation here is that the three systems, the automatron, the panopticon, and the percepticon, operate autonomously to ensure continuous tricyclicality. They are three independent machine systems designed to check and balance physical, informational, and psychological stability.
So this is automated governance, where human subjectivity is theoretically removed or at least mediated by three distinct machine intelligences. Let's break down the domains, starting with the mechanical heart, the automatron.
The automatron is the physical and logistical infrastructure. Its domain is the physical and mechanical integrity of Mookopolis. It oversees logistical automatromania, making sure all the public works and technology.
Like the cryobots and planarizer jisms.
Exactly. Things like large, flattening or stabilizing machines. It ensures they all function at peak fulgur.
Peak fulgur, peak brilliance or intensity. It's not enough for the infrastructure to work. It has to work with dazzling efficiency and philosophical intention.
Precisely. And the automaton interprets policy not through literal statute, but via teleology, the study of purpose, and aperogromancy.
Divination by infinite small acts.
Yes, aperogromancy.
Okay, that's where it gets really abstract. How does an automated system actually interpret policy by divining infinite small acts?
It implies a form of governance that is hypersensitive to microscopic data points. Every minor fluctuation in energy usage or traffic flow or resource allocation is treated as a piece of infinite data that, when you merge it all together, points toward the correct ultimate purpose, the teleology for the state.
So the automatron isn't making binary decisions.
No, it's making decisions based on the collective destiny suggested by trillions of these data points.
It sounds like a government that justifies its grand actions based on the aggregation of every minute functional reality. Now, let's move to the informational brain, the panopticon.
The panopticon is the supreme authority over epistemic chronicity and citizen compliance. And epistemic chronicity is the control over the timing and the veracity of knowledge.
So it doesn't just manage data.
No, it manages the history and the flow of what is known.
So it edits the present understanding of the past and regulates what knowledge is made available in the future. It's a censorship and surveillance system rolled into one grand structure.
And it administers the Quacker-Wamble. It maintains the secret Ignomaticon, and its core task is to perpetually collect, analyze, and maintain all citizen data to prevent furtivitism, secret behavior, and neocrypticism.
New forms of hiding information.
Yes, this is the state's absolute defense against anonymity or dissent hidden within data complexity. The panopticon makes sure there are no shadows, either physical or informational.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the panopticon is what ensures the automatron's aperogromancy data stream stays clean and uncorrupted by citizen secrecy or historical inaccuracies.
Precisely.
And finally, the strange third component, the percepticon. This is the final arbiter of philosophical and social equilibrium. It's responsible for all Percepticon mania.
The Percepticon governs the subjective and psychological state of the citizenry. Its entire mission is ensuring the avoidance of pusillanimous thought.
Cowardly, timid thinking.
Yes.
But practically speaking, how does an automated system govern the mind? How does it enforce the constitutional requirement to avoid pusillanimous thought?
Well, it likely operates through monitoring public discourse and mandated expression, as we'll see in the law sections. If the state detects a widespread pattern of minuendo, subtle, non-committal language, or a drop in grandiloquent impact, the Percepticon intervenes.
Okay.
It balances the ban on kitschapology, bad taste, with a mandate for pulchritudinous expression, or beautiful expression. The Percepticon ensures the Mookopian ideal of worthiness is maintained internally and externally by its citizens. It keeps that moral bar high.
So the triumvirate is a total governance system. Physical function, informational integrity, and psychological alignment, all mechanized and mutually reinforcing.
Absolutely.
This relentless optimization continues right into the Mookopian legal system. Let's move into part 3. The law, the court, and mandatory grandiloquence, because the judicial philosophy in Article 2, Sections 2.02 to 2.04 is a marvel of complexity.
It is. Section 2.02 introduces the law of the gongorismo. Now, gongorismo is a highly ornate, complex literary style, and applying it to law results in the principle of gongorical lubrolacted interpretation.
Let's unpack this. In this interpretation, the spirit of the law is privileged over its literal meaning. So, if the triumvirate determines the intent of a law was X, but the text says Y, they have to rule X.
Correct. And this necessarily leads to equivocation and obnubile aggregationalism's complex, hazy groupings of legal ideas. It's built to prioritize philosophical intent over textual clarity, which gives the automated triumvirate incredible latitude.
The purpose is always the most important factor.
Always. And this flexibility is cemented by a fundamental inversion of common law. The tribunal must determine mens rea, the guilty mind a priori, to assessing the corpus delicti.
The body of the crime.
Exactly. You are judged on your intent before the physical evidence is even fully analyzed.
So intent is everything.
It is. If the state determines you had pusillanimous intent when you were planning your actions, the physical evidence of the act itself becomes secondary to the criminalization of your thought.
Which means the panopticon and percepticon findings The records of your ipseity and pusillanimous thought carry immense weight in court.
Absolutely immense.
And they've carved out a specific jurisdiction for political malfeasance. Snologostropist activity political corruption is tried under the Sycophancy Tribunal.
A tribunal specifically designed to fight the two great Mookopian sins, corruption and excessive flattery. And the penalty is smellfungationism. This is an amazing punishment.
What is it?
A smell fungus is a constant fault finder. So, smellfungationism likely means the guilty party is condemned to a public existence where every action they take is under intense constitutional scrutiny by professional fault finders.
Wow.
They might even be required to report their own moral failures constantly. They're forced to become a self-policing critic, perpetually hunting for their own moral flaws.
The courts are also intolerant of logical flaws. The defense of ignoratio elenchi, presenting an irrelevant conclusion, is strictly disallowed. The judicial process has to adhere to these rigid logical pathways.
And this intolerance of logical failure continues in Section 2.03, Legal Discourse and Lex Generalis. They ban specific logical constructs in court. Non sequitur.
A conclusion that doesn't follow from the premises.
In Petitio Principii, circular reasoning. Mookopian law demands syllogistic clarity.
But they also criminalize rhetorical missteps. Introducing evidence via argumentum ad lazarum, the appeal to poverty, or argumentum ad criminam, the appeal to wealth, is deemed a criminal act of sophistrigonum.
And this is crucial. Poverty or wealth cannot be used to emotionally or logically bias the court. Mookopian justice is supposed to be blind to socioeconomic status. It forces arguments to stand solely on their merit and logic.
It prevents class resentment, or on the flip side, undue reverence for wealth.
Precisely.
And the document addresses the paradox we identified earlier. It explicitly bans pettifoggerheadism, tricky, overly complex lawyering, and using sesquipedalian texturology, or excessively long words, merely to achieve obfuscate complexity or infinitesimania.
And this is where we see that constitutional tightrope walk. The Constitution itself is a masterwork of sesquipedanticism, but it bans lawyers from using long words just to confuse the court.
So what's the difference?
The state's complexity is mandated for grandiloquent impact, projecting philosophical grandeur. The lawyer's complexity is banned if it's used for malicious obfuscation. The difference is intent, and that intent is determined by the gongarismo principle.
The system demands that complexity must serve the greater, pulchritudinous Mookopian purpose, not the selfish goal of confusing a legal opponent.
Exactly. They also maintain strict rules against ad personam or ad hominem attacks, resulting in charges of contumelious conduct. The legal system, for all its abstract absurdity, demands high-minded rhetorical ethics, which aligns perfectly with the Percepticon's mission.
And if we look at the greater context of Section 2.03, even traditional legal principles like imperi delicto or equal fault and res judicata.
A matter already judged.
Right. Those are immediately superseded by findings of widespread atrocity propaganda or gaslighting.
This means that if a case involves informational warfare or psychological manipulation designed to destabilize the state, all legal precedent and traditional due process is immediately set aside.
So the Mookopian courts prioritize the detection and punishment of psychological and informational warfare over the sanctity of established law.
The greatest crime is destabilizing the collective reality.
And then we hit the bizarre climax of their legal standards in Section 2.04, mandatory state rhetoric. This is where the Mookopian style becomes law.
It does. Official decrees must employ hyperbole combined with anaphora, the repetition of a word or phrase at the beginning of successive clauses for maximum grandiloquent impact.
I have to pause for a moment and appreciate the image of a bureaucrat legally required to exaggerate and repeat phrases for maximum flair. Imagine a decree beginning, "We decree, we grandly decree, we eternally decree the mandatory calibration of all dust collection units."
The point is that the state must always project philosophical certainty and overwhelming importance. Subtlety is a sign of weakness, and weakness is pusillanimous thought.
And of course, sesquipedanticism is mandatory for legislative drafting, but they have to avoid logomachycaudalism.
Fighting over words just for the sake of pampering the argument. Complexity must be functional, even if it's exaggerated.
And the final touch is the penalty for linguistic failure. Officials using minuendo subtle insinuation, or engaging in quidonuncological speculation.
Gossipy, inquisitive behavior.
They face fines of 1 fop doodle of currency.
A fop doodle is a trifle or a fool. The penalty for being subtle or gossipy is being fined a trifle. It's an aesthetically perfect, low-grade punishment that signals the state's disdain for petty communication. It just further reinforces the Percepticons' domain of grandeur.
Okay, now we move to part 4, where the control shifts from legal language to pure thought and science, epistemological control and philosophical integrity in Articles 3 and 4.
Section 3.01 on epistemological purity is the Panopticon's masterpiece of intellectual restriction. The state strictly bans antinomythologism
The denial of established myths, or anti-mythology.
and neoplatrisiology that contradicts Mookopian ontogeneticism, which is the state-sanctioned theory of being and development.
That is total thought and cultural control. If your philosophical inquiry or mythological critique goes against the state's fundamental truths, its foundational narrative of how Mookopolis came to be, it is immediately illegal.
The state cannot risk its self-identity being undermined. And to keep intellectual discourse focused, the proliferation of pseudo-paradoxicalisms, so fake philosophical puzzles, and infinitesimality,
An obsession with the trivial or infinite smallness.
outside of sanctioned academic domains, is a felony.
So, if you engage in complex but ultimately pointless intellectual navel-gazing outside the approved university settings, you are committing a felony. The state has constitutionalized the necessity of productivity in thought.
And the goal of all sanctioned scientific endeavor is achieving pure factions and avoiding anomalactometricity's measurements of anomalies. Science must confirm the state reality, not discover destabilizing facts. The entire research goal is to remove deviation.
This fear of deviation is controlled by the Epistemic Chronicity Committee, which is housed under the Panopticon. They review projects specifically to prevent destabilizing concepts.
Yes, things like uncontrolled apparoscission, the splitting of infinite concepts, or infinite nostalgia.
A dangerous longing for infinite things.
This is the state fearing theoretical physics or high philosophy that might make people question the fixed, ordered Mookopian reality. And infinite nostalgia is particularly poignant. It's homesickness for the infinite, a longing for something grander than the controlled muctitude Mookopolis offers. That kind of longing is seen as profoundly destabilizing.
And this fear of uncontrolled complexity extends into technology in Section 3.02. All interferobotics must be reviewed against the risk of automatronancy divination by machinery or unauthorized apparogression.
Unauthorized infinite progress. They don't want the robots guessing the future or advancing faster than the triumvirate permits. Technology is only valuable if it serves the fixed state purpose.
And any permit applicant must demonstrate a total absence of dismutational mania.
An obsession with changing the natural order.
And automatrontology.
The study or theory of automata. This is a classic paradox of an advanced state. You must be technically proficient enough to operate the advanced robots, but you cannot be philosophically curious about how the robots work or how the natural order might be mutated by them.
They want obedient technicians, not philosophical engineers who might cause apparogression.
The ultimate purpose is control, and control requires limiting both theoretical and physical potential for deviation.
Moving on to Article 4, Section 4.01, we look at the heavily constrained right to speak, freedom of utterance, accepting obloquy.
The right to neo-mutterance new speech is granted, but only provided it doesn't constitute attacks, like argumentum ad personam or ad hominem, or excessive flattery, adulation mania, or the promotion of mucktocracy.
Rule by the inept or dirty.
Exactly. In other words, you are free to speak, provided you are polite, honest, and philosophically aligned with the state's high-minded goals. Any speech that panders, attacks, or suggests incompetence in leadership is banned.
So, the state ensures that public discourse remains lofty, avoiding the pitfalls of political mudslinging or simple incompetence.
And the sole exception for prohibited speech is state-sanctioned argy buffoonery during public holidays. This is the designated pressure release valve.
A mandatory, scheduled time for controlled absurdity.
That's it. I can just imagine the triumvirate issuing a decree full of hyperbole and anaphora, mandating that the populace engage in organized, argumentative clowning for exactly 48 hours.
It's incredible. And perhaps the most peculiar rule, which links directly to the Percepticons' desire to eliminate pusillanimous thought, is the use of innuendo.
It's only permissible if followed immediately by a mandatory declaration of guerrilla vituperation.
An immediate verbose condemnation or railing. So if you imply something subtle, you must immediately follow it up with a loud, aggressive rant to cancel out the subtlety.
Subtle behavior is constitutionally banned, except when it is instantly drowned out by loud, aggressive clarity. The Constitution demands that if you use an oblique rhetorical device, you must immediately and aggressively clarify your intent with a torrent of words. No ambiguity allowed.
Even if the clarification is overly dramatic.
Especially then.
Which brings us to Part 5. Vices, exceptions, and the ultimate authority. The Mookopian state doesn't just police thought, it polices character and consumption. Section 4.02 lists specific crimes of character and consumption.
Yes. Prohibited public conduct includes gallimaufry,
Ridicule.
ignoramusculosity, being an ignorant blockhead, and being a mountabladder scateria, a
Yeah.
boastful, loud fraud near triumvirate members. Displaying stupidity or boastfulness in public, particularly near high officials, is illegal.
So even basic social clumsiness is criminalized, reinforcing that expectation of high moral and intellectual conduct.
But the consumption felonies are perhaps the most famous or infamous. Eating flumdiddle, squat piddle, or slumgullion before noon results in immediate infantestacy.
The loss of all infinitudinal rights. Specific, vaguely defined, and probably undesirable breakfast foods are banned before lunch. And the penalty is losing your fundamental rights of endless possibility. What even are flumdiddle and slumgullion?
Presumably, they represent wasteful, disorganized, or perhaps excessively cheap food, the antithesis of pulchronautical advancement. The penalty of infinitestacy means you lose those aperodactylic rights permanently.
You're completely removed from the high-minded project of Mookopolis.
The state dictates that your morning meal must reflect your high moral purpose, or you are relegated to the finite.
And what's also fascinating is the state prohibits parvenu-Europeanism, acting like a rich upstart, and mandates reporting of cookies and pusology.
The study of crazy small concepts. The state dictates acceptable social class aspirations and forbids intellectual curiosity about the fringes. All of this feeds into the idea in Section 4.03, the defense against carcingregianism.
The state's active role in maintaining psychological gravity and defending against internal carcingregianism, that deep, worrying resentment.
The state recognizes that this level of control and mandatory excellence must inevitably breed resentment, and they must constitutionally act against it.
And public servants are mandated to be part of this defense.
They have to swear against rictus Russell behaviors, smiling contemptuously, and furtivitism or secrecy, and they must eschew lackey syphantic behavior. The government must, constitutionally, be sincere, honest, and uncontemptuous. It's an attempt to combat the inevitable bitterness that arises from a hyper-filtered, hyper-controlled society.
Okay, let's explore Article V, the loophole section. Even in a state this rigorous, there are specific, highly conditional exceptions and loopholes.
Section 5.01 gives an exemption from the annual quacker-wamble. If a citizen acts pro bono in a manner exceeding average gravitas,
Great importance or seriousness.
as determined by the Automatron and C subcommittee, they are exempt.
So you can skip the bureaucratic ordeal if a machine committee determines your good deeds were serious enough. This links the moral exemption back to the physical system, the automatron, suggesting that a great physical or logistical contribution can outweigh the necessity of constant psychological testing.
And commercial law is constrained by ethics. Caveat emptor, let the buyer beware, applies, but only if the seller has not engaged in humbuggery or flubberfangle.
Deceptive trickery.
Right. And the principle cannot be used to justify skinflint pricing.
This means commercial freedom is heavily constrained by moral behavior and price fairness. The state recognizes the necessity of commerce, but it forbids rapacious behavior.
And property transfers that foster pulchronautical advancement of beautiful ships or beautiful navigation, are exempt from the Muckerment tax.
But only if the documentation is free from pseudo-fictionality or garrulous eternity.
Verbose silence. The system rewards physical or conceptual progress aimed at beauty and travel.
Garrulous eternity. The legal paradox continues. A silent but verbose presentation of information. You must be silent but communicate everything clearly.
Every single transaction has to be geared toward the Mookopian goal of orderly, magnificent progress.
Finally, we reach Article 6, which describes how this elaborate structure can be changed. And the path of the plethorous amendment is designed to be punishingly arduous. It ensures that change is almost impossible.
First, the proposal has to be certified by the infinitestrum against pusillanimous intent and aperogomania, the obsession with infinite small acts. The proposed change must be big, brave, and driven by high purpose, not trivial whim.
Then it undergoes the dismutational mania review, and this requires review by 7 sycophantastic committees for a period of 1 quinquennium.
5 full years.
5 years.
Think about that delay. 5 years of review by 7 committees that are legally prone to sycophancy, meaning they are designed to agree with the ruling triumvirate or the prevailing consensus.
The process is designed to result in turbidum utterance.
Confused, murky speaking. The amendment is designed to die by committee fatigue and ambiguity, smothered in sycophancy and confused discussion over 5 years.
And if it somehow survives that?
The triumvirate votes, guided by epirocrasis, the merging of infinite small acts, and the result is subject to immediate rigmarole and disclaimer. Even successful change is wrapped in complexity and an immediate retraction of certainty.
So the change is functionally constrained by confusion.
Always.
But the absolute ultimate authority, the clause that subordinates all law to state goals, lies in Section 6.02, the Quaker-Wagtailism clause.
Correct. Any ambiguous phrase in the Constitution, and we've seen there are many, must be decided by which interpretation best encourages the proliferation of mucktivism and pulchronautical endeavors.
This is the ultimate assertion of state purpose. Law is no longer interpreted based on precedent or fairness or citizen rights, but purely on whether it advances the state's goals of organized, magnificent activity and beautiful progress.
And the triumvirate retains the right of metanoia, a change of mind, but it requires a justifying opinion.
A short, epic poem.
A short, epic poem entered into the public record.
So they can change the law on a whim as long as they write a grand, short epic to explain their sudden philosophical reversal. The requirement is not logic, it's poetic grandeur.
It's the perfect closing image for this Constitution. Immense, specific, yet arbitrary power, constrained only by the necessity of mandatory grandiloquence.
So what does this all mean for the Mookopian citizen? We've finished our deep dive into the grand constitution of Mookopolis. This is a society governed by an automated, three-part triumvirate physical, informational, psychological dedicated to filtering its populace through the rigorous annual Quaker-Wumble, enforcing mandatory rhetoric and punishing abstract vices, logical flaws, and bad taste.
And the document is effective immediately upon the next heterodacity of the apeirogon, the next sudden complexity of the infinite figure, and the first utterance of balaga, or eloquence, by the automatron. What this Constitution tells us is that Mookopolis prioritizes automated control and mandated high-mindedness, that ubiquitous sesquipedanticism over clarity, simplicity, or genuine philosophical freedom.
It's a legal system designed to elevate bureaucracy and complexity to a state religion. It doesn't trust the average person to behave well, speak clearly, or think correctly. It mandates perfection and punishes any potential for deviation.
The entire system is built on the premise that moral and intellectual filtering is the state's primary responsibility, regardless of the sheer difficulty, the turbidimutterness of governance this creates. The cost of living in Mookopolis is perpetual, high-stakes psychological scrutiny.
It leaves us with a provocative thought for you, the listener. Given the extensive policing of language, logic, and temperament like banning carking grudgianism and pusillanimous thought, what societal values do you believe Mookopolis successfully sacrifices in its pursuit of muctitude and aperiphoria?
Something to ponder as you navigate your own jurisdiction, hopefully one where eating slumgullion before noon does not result in the loss of all your infinitudinal rights.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.